you were influenced by lots of older stuff. Have you seen anything recent that got you really excited these past couple of years?
Oh, band-wise? Yeah, the band we saw that we loved, we already knew we loved, and was the 5, 6, 7, 8. It's a band from Japan that's very influenced by the Cramps, all-girl band, really tough rock and 2 guitars plus bass and drums, and wild. It was wild, real tiny wild girls, and they played in this tiny club called Jabberjaw. Our friend has this club called Jabberjaw in Los Angeles, and they played there, and it was just amazing. There's bands we haven't seen, but we like the records. Guitar Wolf, another Japanese band called Guitar Wolf, a band from Memphis called the Oblivions. There's a band from Boston called the Upper Crust. Really cool. They wear like white powdered wigs, and all their songs are sort of exaggerations about being aristocracy, about being above everything. They have a song called "I'm a friend of a friend of the working class." So it's like the opposite of punk, but to such an exaggeration that it's hilarious. And they say we're too high class. Well, that's balderdash, and it's just, and they're great. And I'm sure I left someone out. Oh, the Demolition Doll Rods, who we're going to tour with. Danny was the guitar player, one of the guitar players in the Gories, who were a very legendary, broken up band, a legendary band that nobody's heard of. But now one of the guitar players is in Demolition Doll Rods. It's good.
They're on tour with us in America in October and November with Guitar Wolf, whoever comes to that show is gonna really see gonna get their money's worth, because those bands are really great, both of them.
I read this review of a Cramps show a couple of years ago, and it said, you better realize, kids, that without the Cramps, there wouldn't have been White Zombie, there wouldn't have been 9 Inch Nails, there wouldn't have been Deftones. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I think that's true, and a lot of those artists you mentioned have, credited us with, being an influence. They don't sound like us. I mean, those artists have done something original, but they wouldn't be doing that particular original thing without the influence of us, I don't think.
Well, it's flattering to that people say that, and I think it's true to some degree. But none of those bands really sound like us either. Because I have heard people say they're this Cramps influence band and that Cramps influence band. Most of the time, I can't hear it. I think they're influenced more by just all the things that we kind of stand for. Have kind of spawned a bunch of bands that like the same things as we do and have the same ideas about some things we do, and then make a little bit different kind of music. So that's good. I feel like it's made a more richer musical horizon out there for than might otherwise exist.
You guys know the Misfits?
It's amazing we didn't, and the first time we saw them was about 2 months ago.
No way.
No, we had never seen them. It's weird, when they came just slightly after us in New York, and about the time they were playing clubs in New York was when we were starting to get recognition in Europe. So we were touring in Europe, and then in 1980 we moved to Los Angeles, and I guess they were becoming even more popular on the East Coast. And we never saw them. We never saw them with Glenn Danzig, but we just saw them 2 months ago in Los Angeles, and we thought it was great. It was a really good show, and I thought they looked like what punks should really look like. That was the look. That would be the perfect, not like you ain't no punky punk. And I thought, now that's a punk, and
because I thought they had the same vibe going on actually, but totally exaggerated as like the Cramps. I mean,
yeah,
this rockabilly over the top.
The show we saw didn't seem to have rockabilly, but it was just like a real heavier. Yeah. More a heavier sound. I don't know. Did they? I don't know.
Old records though are told that there are lots of rockabilly, rock and roll influences.
I didn't know. I didn't even know that. Yeah.
Die, my darling.
Yeah, because we knew that the titles. That they. Because I think they're even on Plan 9 Records, and that was like a movie we really dig. Yeah. And
you moved to LA. Did the Cramps fit into the glam rock vibe going on?
You mean that thing in the 80s, that glam rock? No.
LA is so glam music-wise. Still, I
We
think.
don't have really anything to do with LA too much. We stay home
But-
by ourselves. I mean, we live there, but we don't have a lot to do with it. We've in the 17 years we've lived there, we've been to 2 parties, I think. So
First was the
There's different. The thing about LA and it's so big is there's a lot of different parallel scenes. And yeah, in the 80s, that glam rock one, I guess you mean like Guns N' Roses, LA Guns kind of thing, got noted for that. And there were a lot of bands like, that kind of designing themselves to please the music industry or something, But at the same time, there's always been good bands. And right now there's good bands. There's like a whole scene of bands like that wear disguises and play like kind of surf instrumental 60s stuff. There's some are real good and some aren't, and it doesn't even matter. They're all like kind of part of a scene. There. Oh, what's the one? Oh, Invisible Men, Ghastly Ones, the Black Widows, and they all have like. Some of them are, one member will be in several of the bands because you can't see the identity of who's even in the bands, so they play in several bands. They're sort of like concept bands, but in a real cheesy, fun kind of way. And so that's a very small scene, but it's a lot of fun. And that scene kind of shares with San Francisco. There's like kind of a LA, San Francisco, West Coast thing of these bands. And a big car club scene, too, which we like, which couldn't exist in New York. Of a lot of people have hot rod cars, with flame jobs, and they're really into putting every bit of money they have, they put into their cars. That's their world. And that's really cool. And that's actually growing. And there's becoming more of a connection with the car clubs and the band scene there. But it's very underground. It's not something you're going to read about in any kind of major press. It's more like the Gearhead scene. And
Is it still possible to be underground? I mean, like these days, it seems like the media picks up on things so fast.
no, I don't think that's true. Yeah, it's very possible to be underground because it seems to me like everything that's groovy that's going on, the media doesn't pick up on it. They're often running with techno and saying that Green Day is the new punk, and they're doing all this kind of manufactured stuff. Meanwhile, there are a lot of really, really, really great bands that have to put out their own records, and they sell like 400 of them, and that's all that happens. The Mummies from San Francisco, they're just a really, really great band. And what could be more exciting? They come out all bandaged up and rotted looking and stuff like that and everything, and play really great music.
like Sonics and
But you don't hear it. You don't hear the Invisible Men. They come out there all wearing tuxedos and stuff like that, but all bandaged up faces and stuff like that. And play really. There's just a lot of great, like Guitar Wolf, their new album Planet of the Wolves. It's going to be out in a couple weeks or something like that. It's just amazing album. It's probably the most Cramps influenced thing I've heard, but they're just really way over the top, and really high energy, great thing. And I bet that won't get very big. It's just too wild. So yeah, in the answer to your question, it's very possible to be very underground these days. I think it's really the same thing. The best bands never get heard very much. The band we were talking about with the powdered wigs, the Upper Crust. I'm not sure. I think they might have broken up by now. And the Gories, they broke up. One of the best bands of the past 10 years or something like that. They broke up because no one paid a bit of attention. They could get nowhere, And they were an amazing band, better than any band I can think of that's got some kind of major record company behind them.
You have to have a major record company deal because the Dead Kennedys are pretty amazing, and they did it all by themselves, and Fugazi still does it by themselves.
No, I think probably a major record companies. In our experience, our last album went through Warner Brothers salesmen and stuff like this. It was distributed by Warner Brothers, and they did a horrible job. And sell any records. It's the worst thing.
It's hurt us worse. Any achievements we've made have been more on our own through word of mouth and through our live shows. And when we've been involved with majors, it just gets confusing and messy.
It seems like a lot of, especially in America, I don't know over here, but in America, the media is just works in conjunction with the record companies, and the record companies invent bands, and the whole thing. It's just that major record. It's just product, and all the bands that are really doing something because they love music and they're really good at it and everything. It's the same story as with us when we started. The record companies don't want to know about that. It's too weird. They could never sell it. It doesn't fit. One of the main things major record companies say, I heard that they criticize bands as they say, it doesn't sound like what's on the radio now.
Yeah, you know how they sign bands, and I can't believe this is, and this seems different from like during the punk scene. I mean, because at least like when Ramones and Blondie and various bands were signed, there was already an excitement for those bands, and I think that led to them getting deals because there was like, sort of the buzz on the street. The public liked them. Their shows were really hot. But now the thing is, at least in America, is to try. It's like a race to sign a band, and they sign a band that's maybe all the time. They'll sign a band that's done like 2 shows, has no following. A lot of times they'll sign a band that's been playing for 2 years and has no following. Now that tells me that if a band's been playing 2 years and nobody's interested in them, why would you sign them? Yet like he mentions the Gories. There's bands who they do their shows and people go wild at the shows, and record companies don't take a cue from that. Like, well, if people are going wild right now, what would happen if we promote this and distribute this? That to me would be, in my mind, is more logical thinking. But that's not how they sign bands. They sign bands that are undeveloped, have not figured out how to connect with an audience yet. A band that doesn't, have anything. It's just somebody that's just formed, has not, means nothing to anyone. That just seems like a mistake.
It's part of the history of rock and roll. It's always been that way with big major record companies. They want to get something, and because they want to get it first before anybody else, and they want to say, look what we discovered. It's their ego. They're all ego trips. Like nobody knows about it, and we got it, and it's ours, and we discovered it, and everything. Meanwhile, it just stinks. And it sounds like something that's on the radio now, which also stinks, it's always been that way, VJ Records, Specialty Records had the opportunity to sign the Beatles, and they said, "Are you kidding?" Little Richard tried very hard to get the Beatles signed to Specialty Records, and they could have had it. And the Beatles wanted it really bad because they loved Larry Williams and all the artists on Specialty Records, and Specialty Records went out of business right after that because they couldn't sell any records. But they didn't want anything to do with the Beatles because they looked too weird, and it didn't sound like what was on the radio now. No one would ever be interested in that, It's just the history of rock and roll. It never changed.